Welcome to the Persons of Interest podcast, diving into careers, personal stories, life lessons, and more. Here's your host, Derek Dockett.
The Persons of Interest podcast continues, and I think we can call this one a podcast return because this gentleman had me on his podcast, so now I'm having him on mine. And originally, I was going to just take the podcast that we recorded and posted it to my feed, but I didn't because, A, I don't like talking about myself that much, and we spent a whole lot more time talking about me, and I'm more interested in your background, so I'm like, my podcast is about people, their stories, how they make their way throughout life and careers. Jakob Eliason, I appreciate you for having me on your podcast. Welcome to my podcast, Persons of Interest.
Thanks for having me. If this is anything like the last time that we sat and recorded a conversation, it's going to be really good. I've been looking forward to it all day, to be honest with you. So it was
enjoyable. I really did enjoy our talk. Could have gone on for another 2 hours, but here we are back again. So I'm excited to chat. So I guess what I always like to do is have people give the Reader's Digest about themselves, because from what I know about you, and just like we talked in your podcast, we just connected via social media, via Twitter, and I know about you because of from your own podcast and listening to your episodes. But I want to hear you tell the folks, my listeners, about what it is you do, what it is you're interested in, and how you got to November 30th, 2020.
It's been a long road to November 30th, 2020.
Not counting what we've been through in 2020.
Yeah, the last month and a half could be a whole 30-minute to 45-minute segment on just things that have happened over the last 30 days. It's crazy. Things are moving so fast. But no, my name is Jakob Eliason. I'm originally from Northeast Arkansas, a smaller city of about 70,000 people in Northeast Arkansas. And when I graduated college, I moved to Memphis. About 2 years after I graduated, I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and got married. And now I've started my career here. And so that's the general last 5 years of what's going on. But from a career standpoint, when I left college, I went straight into sales. I have a marketing degree, but I went straight into sales, quite frankly, because I couldn't get a marketing job, because it was difficult to come by. There's a lot of different variables, I think, in that specific conversation. There's not only was jobs were scarce because marketing is always in demand, but at the same time, there was a chasm between traditional marketing and digital marketing as companies were trying to figure out how to adapt. And the kind of marketing that I wanted to do, I really didn't feel qualified for. And the kind of marketing that I felt qualified for, which is more traditional marketing, the jobs were scarce. And so I was in this kind of divide. And so I went sales. I was like, what's the closest thing to it? If I want to be a business owner or something one day, I'm going to have to sell stuff. So I was like, let's go sales. And so I ended up taking the only sales job offered to me, moving a couple hours from home in Arkansas. I was still in Arkansas at this point, right out of college, but I ended up moving a couple hours from home. I took a sales job with a marketing company. I was like, yeah, this is the thing. This makes sense. This is where my skill set lies. It wasn't. I was not very good at it. And because I was fresh out of college, no sales experience other than working at Sears selling TVs or working in the country club pro shop trying to sell an extra sleeve of golf balls to get a commission off of it or something crazy like that. But I didn't have any sales experience, and I was responsible for the entire process from, identifying leads to closing them and then getting recurring revenue from them. Like I was the whole thing, the cold calling, the outreach, everything. And I was like, it was overwhelming. I hadn't learned any of that. And I had a sales trainer through the company, but he was saying things like, I remember he asked me why I wanted to be in sales, and I was like, I love people. And he was like, that's a wrong answer. You're not going to succeed in sales. And I was like, I don't know if I trust you then. And so I was blind. I had my own lens on it, and it just didn't work out. Moved back to Jonesboro and ended up getting a job opportunity from the company that I had been interviewing with while I was in school and thought that I was going to get hired by and didn't. And so eventually they did hire me. It's like 3 months after I had moved away. I went back to Jonesboro. And so I was living with my parents just because it happened so fast, and I was still paying rent in a couple places just to try to make it work. And I'd come back and started working there, ended up saving this is where everything starts to shift.
Okay.
I was living at my parents and I had a lot of time. I was going to work. I was coming home. It was like 8 to 5. I was in the sales role and I was traveling sometimes, but not much. And so I was going to work and I was coming home and I had a lot of time on my hands. And what happened at first is I started playing like FanDuel and really dumb stuff like that. Like I was spending all my time on like fantasy sports because I was like, if I am going to have all this time, I'm going to make some money or something crazy like that. But then I was like, wait a minute, I could read a book or something. And so I read Mark Cuban's book on how to win at the sport of business, and it sparked an interest in reading.
Okay.
And so that kind of slowly developed over time. But what happened was I started reading, and one of the books that I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, oh, hey, I've saved up enough money to put a down payment on a cheap house. And so I went and bought a house while I was still living in Jonesboro. And so then I got to doing that. And then through reading more, it was a slow process of realizing that there was so many more opportunities than what I was exposing myself to. And I knew that the only way for me to get to those opportunities was to get out of where I was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I felt stuck or completely suffocated or drowning. I didn't like my job. That wasn't it for me. That definitely wasn't what I wanted to do forever and retire on. So I was like, hey, now's the time. And so that kind of led to me leaving Jonesboro completely, moving to Memphis on a whim, pretty much. I love Memphis. I've always loved Memphis. I'm a big Grizzlies fan, and I always wanted to be in Memphis, but it was on a whim because I chased a girl. I met her and I was like, oh, yes, I can move to Memphis now. But we hit it off, and now we're married. And she's probably listening somewhere out in the apartment to me talk really loud. And yeah, so that's the short story. I went sales when I got here in Memphis. I took a sales job again. It was something I knew that I could get, but all the while I had the plan of eventually getting out of there. And it was just a slow process of over 4 to 5 years of getting there. And now this time last year, I left my corporate banking job, community banking job, but it's still a corporate environment as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And I left my community banking job. I was a branch manager at a bank, and I left that to start my own thing and go into the marketing world that I've studied so hard over the past 4 to 5 years outside of school to learn more about and develop myself in. And I just finally decided to take the chance on myself because what I was doing wasn't cutting it. And that's where we are today. That's developed over the year. And now I'm really heavily involved in 2 separate organizations. But that's the long drawn out 6.5 minute version of that.
That kind of leads into exactly what I was going to ask, because it seems you're more willing to take those leaps based on moving, based on career, because we'll get into what you're doing now, because that's what I'm most intrigued by. But the process of moving, was that something that you were sort of like, I'm doing this, or did you have any hesitation at all?
I didn't really have hesitation, no. Just the idea of moving?
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any hesitation. If we're being honest, I was looking for a reason to get to Memphis. Okay. And I don't say that to say, oh, any girl that gave me attention, I'm going to move to Memphis. It was just like, no, when we started having a conversation and we started getting to know each other, I was like, oh, if I want to pursue this, I got to get over there. Yeah. This is my chance. And it was that kind of thing. No, there was really no hesitation. I owned a house there. I'm thankful to the people that still live in that house right now. My roommate from when I lived there before still lives there. And so that was the biggest piece was, what am I going to do about this house? They still rent it from me. So I've been able to keep that. So that's been a good thing too. Okay.
So you've got that get on a limb, go out there, put yourself out there, bone in you. So the first job out of college, I don't know about you, my first job out of college, as you just explained, some fields are very competitive. I also, the marketing background, specifically graphic design, my degree is in art and design with a minor in advertising promotion. So similar. You'd be someone I'd be on a team with in the corporate world. But I get it. Like at some point, people often say, man, getting a job is hard. I don't think they really realize that until they go out there and start looking for it, especially when you're that fresh out of college and you're actually looking for a job. I always try to tell like high school kids, especially college kids, soon to be college grads, looking for a job is a job. And I don't know how many people actually understand that. But when you were going through that process, did you have any idea that looking for a marketing job was going to be as competitive as you found out it was?
No, absolutely not. I had no idea. Okay, let me back up. I might have had professors that would have said, hey, the field's competitive. You should get an internship.
Oh, we all do, but we don't believe them.
I did get an internship. Okay. I got an internship with a shoe company in Jonesboro that I was close friends with the owner at the time. But I had no idea how business worked.
Yeah.
And come to find out, that guy didn't know as much about how business worked as I expected him to as a business owner. Therefore, him being able to educate and train me and teach me in marketing, it didn't happen. I was just posting on Instagram and then getting asked why we didn't have a plan. And I was like, what do you mean? It was like there was so much miscommunication. It just wasn't a great experience. It didn't really give me the full marketing thing. But I think a lot of that is because they didn't really teach us how business worked and or how money works, which ultimately is the reason, like understanding how money works and how money flows is the reason that people are able to step out on their own and make their own living. And it's essentially boils down to money exchanges hands when problems are solved. The bigger the problem that you solve, the more money you're going to exchange in the process. And so I guess when I realized that the things that I was selling, the things that I was spending all the time prospecting and stuff for were on the low end of the things that I could sell. I'm not talking about houses, but I'm talking going into the digital space. I was like, oh, wow. So that's the shift there was I wasn't really ever taught how money in business worked and in career worked. And in turn, the marketing education I got in college didn't really teach me as much about how business worked as it actually does today. And then certainly the digital aspect wasn't there either. So it was all just vague.
Yeah. No, trust me. I get that because when I'm taking marketing classes back in dating myself age wise, but back in 2001, 2002, before I graduated college, there's no social media at that point. And I get a job in 2010 working in sports, in specifically collegiate sports, managing social media accounts. And specifically my job is to promote this league, promote ticket sales, promote this sport to fans, and do what I can to let people know when games are on TV. Yeah, people may say that's easy. It's sports. It markets itself. But when you're trying to sell tickets, when you're trying to put butts in seats, when you're trying to TV commercials for sponsors, I don't think people understand all that. And you nailed it when you said how the money piece works with it, because that's something to me I didn't get in college. That goes to on-the-job training, and that's something you get from having a supervisor or someone on your team that is willing to take a chance on you. And I'm thankful I had someone to take that chance on me. But that leads me to my curiosity of how and why you decided ultimately to get out of the corporate space and do your own thing, because that's something for me, especially as a graphic design person, I won't say expert at all, because I don't think there's experts in any field. You got to continuously learn, but freelancing and going to business for yourself is something I've always been intrigued by when people do it. And you have, and I'm curious, what was that experience like, that transition? Nerve-wracking? What was the ultimate thing that said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot?
First of all, I would say that you are an expert. You are an expert to someone, because how I view an expert is it's someone who has traveled the path that you're on and is just a step ahead of you. That's how I view an expert.
I'll take that.
Look at it in the financial sense. If you're a financial coach or a basketball coach, or for me in the marketing field, a marketing coach, like I don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything to help bring someone from point A to point B and whatever that is. So I would say you are an expert. But as far as that process, what was the question one more time? I'm sorry, we'll cut this part out, but remind me of the question.
Your decision to transition from the corporate space to doing your own thing.
Okay. As far as the decision itself goes, it was more of a series of a lot of different little smaller decisions that ultimately ended up where they are today. Like when I'm looking back at the day that I was reading Mark Cuban's How to Win the Sport of Business book, I had no idea. And if you would have told me what I'd be doing right now, I really wouldn't probably have believed me. You look back 5 years ago, you tell yourself what you're doing now, I wouldn't have believed myself. And so it's the result of a bunch of small decisions, and those were in the form of opportunities, and sometimes in the form of just being bold and doing the extra thing. For example, I was at the bank because before I was working at the bank, I was working in a corporate sales job. I was selling payroll. I'm not going to go into the company's name, but I was basically cold calling, walking up and knocking on businesses' doors and trying to drum up leads to sell them payroll software.
Okay.
And that was what I did as soon as I moved to Memphis. I didn't like that. And I had started banking at this small place, at this little community bank downtown. Turns out that's the one I would work at later, and built a relationship with the branch manager there over time. We realized our families knew each other from back in Arkansas. And one day I was in there and he mentioned, hey, you seem pretty good at what you do. And you probably hang out with people that are good at what they do. If you know anybody, my assistant manager's leaving and I'm looking for somebody good. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll keep my ear to the ground. And I turned around and walked out, got in my car, and then was like, wait a minute, this is my chance. And so I don't know if I don't know if Matthew McConaughey just released a new book and it's called Green Lights. And I listened to it while I was running in the past few weeks. And he talks about the concept of a green light, meaning like an opportunity to just press green and go. And that's how I look at that type of situation. Is I was like, oh, okay. And so I went back in and I was like, green light. And I said, I'm interested. And they were like, really? For real? And I said, yeah. And I interviewed 2 weeks later. I got the job, got hired, boom, ended up getting promoted, branch manager. They were incredible in me leaving. And so it was just like, it's a series of a lot of different decisions that I was expecting an opportunity to happen and pressing the gas when it did. That's what it boils down to. It was constant preparing and looking, being expectant of an opportunity. And then when that opportunity presented itself, to press the gas. And that resulted in a lot of slammed doors.
Yeah.
Right. Like I applied for multiple positions with the Grizzlies, including the executive assistant to the manager or to the president. Sorry. And like a lot of different places. I was trying to get my foot in a lot of different doors and those shut. But I still kept doing it. And so that's ultimately what it was. It was my decision was I'm going to take opportunities and I'm going to go for opportunities that I want instead of go for opportunities that pay more, was what it came down to. And that resulted in me taking a lot of shots that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise.
Got to shoot your shot. That's what people say.
Got to, man. And that's crazy that you say that, because when I was still in Jonesboro, that was, quite honestly, I just discovered Shea Serrano, who writes for The Ringer.
Okay.
And he's hilarious, but he was hitting on that so hard. And I just discovered him on Twitter and reading his books and Rap Yearbook. And he just produced basketball and other things and movies and other things and all this kind of stuff. But he always hit on shoot your shot. And it resonated with me, not on a cheesy level, but on a, yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to shoot it for you.
And that's why I tell people all the time, like, you see a job, take me, for example, the job that I currently have working for my school district. I saw it looked interesting. I'm like, you never know. And give it a shot, give it a chance. If you're looking for something different, you think you might be able to do, why not? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But if it does, you don't know what it leads to. So that's what I constantly tell people that are on the fence, like, especially people that are, I'm not qualified for this job. I see a job opening, but I'm not qualified, so I'm not going to apply. To me, that's like the worst attitude, because you just don't know what the people on the other end are thinking, because they may or may not find the quote unquote perfect candidate, but they can find someone that's a fit. Find someone that's got the personality that understands the goals of their company. That could mean the world to them. And I don't think people really quite understand that. There's one thing to say you've got the experience, or you know how to use the software, or you've got the educational background, but there is something to be said for having the attitude and just being a fit for some company's culture. I think that goes understated so often. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, it's all about being a fit on a team. Every single person plays their role. And that's what I loved about working in a smaller organization, is that I got to play a bunch of those roles. And I think that's where I knowing that I like to be in control of a lot of stuff, is where I knew that, hey, I'd probably be good at leading something one day, or managing, or running my own business, being able to have my hand in multiple different things and keeping a bunch of balls in the air at the same time kind of thing. But it's definitely culture.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, we're, especially as we move forward into this next generation of the workforce, you're going to have to enjoy the people that you're around at work every day, or people aren't going to want to be there. Millennials we're already not staying at our jobs very long. That's not a bad thing. The generations above me think that's a bad thing. But when you explain it to them in front of them, like I've had to explain it in an interview. I took this job and I didn't like it and I wanted to pursue this. And when you break it down, it's, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But we have the ability to do that. And we could go down the generation gap thing and the retirement gap thing for a long time, but we'll save that.
Absolutely. Are you ever on edge about, I'm doing this, I'm in business for myself, or I'm involved in these projects, but day to day, not knowing how it could be? Like I have a number of folks that I used to work with in an advertising agency world that are designers or photographers or copywriters, and they've got these skills. And at one point or another, they decided they were either laid off or they took a different job, a job that didn't work out. And they decided, you know what? I think I can do this myself. I can get my own clients, or I can work for some people contract based. And they do it. Some do it. Some it's just hit or miss. And they have this very, I don't want to say they struggle, but they're inconsistent. They're not their workflow isn't a solid, continuous pattern. They may go a month where they're busy, and then they may have 2 weeks where they have absolutely nothing. Do you ever have that sort of worry on your mind? Or is it just, what if I put my head down and connect with as many people as I can, they will find out I can help them? What's your mentality on being able to do things for yourself and be confident about it?
That's a really good question.
And you can answer however you feel comfortable. Because I know I have one of my closest friends. She works as a illustrator. She draws by hand, and she takes it as a computer into Adobe Illustrator software, and she redraws it on the computer to turn it into vector artwork. And she charges a lot, but she's very talented. She's very skilled, but she doesn't have consistent work. And I always wonder, do you worry at all? Because for me, if I were to go in business for myself, I would worry about being consistent and growing a business if I were to freelance or do something like that for myself.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah. I worry. It's especially starting out. It's scary. I remember trembling, walking, like sitting down to tell my boss what I was thinking. And which was another cool thing about working there, is I like opened up to him, like, this is what I'm thinking. And he was like, if you think this is the right decision, go for it. But anyway, I just remember how terrified I was, because it's the unknown. It's completely the unknown. I had lined up 2 or 3 different projects before I left. And I had there's also some cushion that I put back too. Like I did a little financial planning and said, what is the minimum kind of amount of money that I need to save before I'm willing to take this leap? And so I prepared myself. And to be quite honest with you, the way that 2020 has turned out only played in my favor, because had I not, I would have been in a much worse position in June or May if we were still out actively meeting, having business meetings and stuff like that, because my priorities would have been completely different.
Yeah.
So when all that happened, I allowed everything to shift. I allowed myself to step back and say, do I need to move the goalposts? And I did move the goalposts and set a new goal and a new kind of path forward. And that was the one that paid off. And so that was the big thing that helped. I was absolutely terrified coming into that, because things weren't going as well as I would have liked them to in March, April, May, after some things happened in January, February, March. And so I was getting scared and I was getting built up. But then when I realized, oh, hey, like, it doesn't have to be this way. You have these other couple of relationships that you can really pursue. I started doing that, and I shifted and started putting my energy and my time into really one bucket and building a really strong relationship and just staying inside. It's basically what I did. I was like, I'm not spending money. I'm going to invest in this relationship. And then through that, not necessarily through that, but at that same time, another relationship popped up, and I was introduced to this guy, and then we hit it off on a business partnership. And now I'm involved with that too. So it was just really, I learned that you're in control still, right? Like at the end of the day, you're still in control. If you're not getting sales, you can go get more sales. It all comes down to, this is what I circled this when you were asking that question. I put the willingness to figure it out. Like, to me, that's what's going to separate people. So I don't have clients. You have social media. There's 300 million people on Twitter, and there's a search bar. Okay. I know you can go figure it out. Do you want to do it that way? No, you got to make that decision. Do you need money enough now that you're going to go and do it this way? Or do you have time? Have you bought yourself enough time to figure it out the right way? Because I'm big on my reputation. I don't want to go and grow my digital footprint in a way that's going to build me a negative reputation.
Sure.
I don't want to be reaching out and being involved with business opportunities and stuff that are going to build me a bad reputation. So I play all that into that. But I think that it's what it comes down to, is the willingness to figure it out. And in today's world with freelancing, that comes down to being able to generate new leads for business.
Yeah.
And so there's a really good book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and it talks about working on the business as a system. And it talks about like developing processes and operations manuals to where like anyone, it's like McDonald's. They don't sell like the franchise is, you're selling a business that already operates. Like, I pay $750,000, but then I get a business that runs itself. And so if you can set your business up like that, then you can grow. And that's the idea behind it. And a lot of people get stuck in what he calls technician mode, where it's, okay, I'm a really good content strategist, right? Like, I can look at somebody's business and kind of dissect it and say, here's a really good avenue for you to take your business's content. This could generate really good leads for you. But if I was like, okay, I want to build a business on content strategy, then I'm only doing one thing, and I'm never even considering the accounting or the finance or the sales. So I think that's where a lot of freelancers and consultants get stuck, is they only want to do the thing that they're good at instead of running a business.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got to do to be able to grow. You have to have a well-oiled machine to grow a business.
I talked to a guy in a previous podcast episode he does do freelance design work, and we talked about the same process, but from a design standpoint, the number of college kids that say, if I'm not going to get a job, I'll just freelance because I'm pretty good with Photoshop. And First of all, the first thing that came to us was, number one, in the graphic design world, there's more than just Photoshop. So make sure you know your software, right? Because you're not going to just be in Photoshop all day long. You're going to be using other Adobe products and other pieces of software like Microsoft and Google and everything else. So don't just think it's Photoshop and that's the end of the world. But the other part is we talked about, and just what you just said just now is, man, can you manage your own books? Can you do your business side? You may know how to do this, but do you know how to do all these other things that revolves around you managing a business that you're saying you're going to have for yourself? And I had one person reach out to me after that, said, wow, my mind was blown. I decided to not do that because I realized I wasn't prepared to do it, but at some point I would like to be. Right. And that's what I want people to understand, is that if you dig yourself in too soon and don't have that complete understanding, A, it's great to be prepared, but B, how prepared are you? And then how willing are you to invest in yourself and to do it?
Right.
So it's good to hear you say that, because I don't know how many people really do get that part of it. Because that's something like I said, for me, going from working at an advertising agency to a direct marketing company to college athletics to a school, I've seen so many different sides of corporate, independent business, nonprofit, you name it. And there is one consistent, is that they all have these different people who operate as a team. Well, you're doing this by yourself. Your team you got to be able to handle all different facets of that to make sure you can be well-rounded.
You got to go find your team.
Yeah.
That's another issue that freelancers and consultants face, because the company that I work with, we work with freelancers. Like, we see that's another thing that they face, is they won't go partner with other entrepreneurs to make business happen. They think they got to do it all by themselves, and they don't. There's so much to go around. Yeah. But to go back there, I want to make it clear. I do not think that I was prepared to run a business or to start a business or to build a business when I left. I prepared financially to buy myself time.
Gotcha.
I knew that the best way that I could spend that X amount of dollars that I had put in safety reserve was on me. And I knew that if I could buy myself enough time, that I could figure this out. At least that's the gamble that I was taking.
Sure.
And whether that was through my knowledge or the work that I would put in to learn more stuff, or the relationships that I was good at building, however that was going to happen, I was just betting on myself to figure it out. And it paid off, or it's paying off now. We're on the verge of something really big, but we're not there yet.
But you're getting there. Thanks. You're started down the road, and you've started creating those relationships, which is important. Creating those relationships.
We have. Yeah, we're in a good spot right now. We're in a good spot. It's COVID kind of took Thanksgiving from me, but other than that, I'm so excited. I get to wake up doing stuff I enjoy every day, and yeah. And that's what it's about.
I was going to say, man, that's the one thing I cannot stress to people, is that when you're doing something that you appreciate, you enjoy, it doesn't make it feel like it's work. You're getting up and you're motivated and you're passionate about it. And that's the one thing that no one can take away from you, because that's going to keep you energized. I'm sure that's regardless of 2020 being what it is, what's driving you toward the future is the fact that this is something you're interested in doing.
Yes. And I've also figured out something that allows me to work on a more efficient schedule. I can get my exercises in. I can get my 8 hours of sleep. I can get my family time in with my wife and still have time to put in a really hard day's work. And when you get to do that, you're fulfilled at the end of the day. Yeah. And so just being able to be fulfilled for the time being and not worrying about, to go back earlier, I try not to worry about what could happen next. I just try to keep getting up and pushing for it every day, because I know that's going to pay off more in the long run.
You talked about your being able to find time for yourself, for your wife, on the personal side. Mm-hmm. What was the driver in you starting to do the podcast? Was that more of a personal project sharing? Because number one, I am impressed the fact when you were doing, so you pivoted here lately with I'll call it the second season, but when you first started doing it, you were just talking to a mic, and I'm super envious of that, because this is probably like the third or fourth role at a podcast that I've been doing, but I always wanted to do it with somebody else. But now I didn't want to do it with someone else and depend on their schedule. I just wanted to have people on to tell the story. Number one, I enjoy yours because not only do you just share your process, your stream of consciousness, so to say.
Pretty much.
But I love it because it's also, man, this is inspiring me to do this, so I can do that. I'll admit, I don't want to say I don't have time to read books, but I just don't. Like, I'm on the internet all the time. I'm probably on Twitter way too much, which I'll freely admit. But you talk about the books you're reading, other things you got going on, and just outside of like marketing stuff. Is that podcast just another mental outlet for you? Like, why the podcast? What drove you to do it? And what's that providing you on a personal level?
So I'll say first, if you're listening and you can't tell by this point, I really like to talk. So I really enjoy talking, and even more importantly, I really enjoy talking about things that I enjoy talking about.
And that's a good reason to have a podcast.
Yeah, it is. It is a good reason to have a podcast. And I actually started that podcast about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, in 2018. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I wanted something. Like, I was just trying to figure something out at that point. This was 2.5 years ago. And I started podcasting, and I basically recorded 10 episodes. It was all pretty much centered around basketball and just like goofy millennial rhetoric is what it just was. It was like, I told this story about me hating camping and how my in-laws always wanted to go camping. And while that stuff's relevant, it didn't really, I had nowhere to go with it. Like, I wasn't going into stand-up comedy. Like, I didn't know really what to do. And so that was kind of me. I was able to see that and say, okay, let's take a step back. And I just stopped. And I spent like 18 months. I was like, I would check in with it every month or so and say, do I want to pursue this again? Because what I learned through that is there was a lot of people listening to what I had to say.
Yeah.
Like, quite honestly, like I dropped my first episode and had 100+ listens to it. And I just dropped it on Twitter and like Instagram, where I'd already restarted because nobody cared what I was posting on Instagram anymore. And it just got so much traction so quick. I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm talking about things that don't matter. And I got people listening. And I was going through a very personal transformation at that point too. So it was this, if I'm going to have a platform where people are paying attention and I have people's attention, then it needs to be something that I feel good about.
Yeah.
Right. It's got to mean something. If they're going to be spending this time, and for me as somebody who's, hey, invest in yourself, read books. It's like, so for somebody to take time spending 30 minutes to 40 minutes of their day with me, that's important. And I want it to mean something. So I was like, I've got to recalibrate. And part of that recalibration was just me recalibrating as a human in general. But I just said, I can't really pursue this until I'm ready. And this year, after going through this really weird process of realizing I was ready to leave the bank and then actually leaving and then getting into this new space, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready, because now I have actually something to say and I can just open up and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what this is looking like. Now COVID has happened. I'm stuck at home. It was a creative outlet. It's a creative outlet for me. I like talking. I like telling stories. I really think that the podcast is about to evolve into something that I'm really excited about, because the more that I talk and the more that I get feedback and the more conversations that I have, the more like really I feel responsible.
Yeah.
Like I'm having really good conversations that mean something, that matter, that can impact people, that can make change, and again, that's been 4 or 5, right, at this point. But that's kind of what I want it to be, is an outlet for people between the ages of 25 and 45, wherever you fall into that. We're all going through this same process. We're all really in the same generation. There's people ahead, there's people behind, there's people in the middle of the whole deal, but we're all walking this same road. And I personally think that the best road is working for myself. And so that's a twist that I bring to it. And it's an audio documentary really for me.
I like that.
The things that I've got going on, things that I'm thinking about, and then the people that I cross paths with along the way that I feel like the selfish thing to say there is that I can learn something from.
Yeah.
And that also recording that conversation gives me a way to, pass that conversation on to somebody who may or may not have the opportunity to meet with somebody that intelligent or that with that specific story. So
how did you discover people were listening? I look at my stats of my podcast too, and I'm about the same way. I get on the average between 75 and 125 listens. I don't promote it a whole lot. I send out a tweet when I get it done, and that's it. I don't expect a whole lot of people to reshare it. I have some friends that do. I don't post it on Facebook. I just post it on Twitter because that's where I am. That's the space that I spend the most time in social media. And that's it. Like, it's literally, maybe this story will help someone, and that's why I did it. And that's actually why mine started. It started for that same reason. Someone told me a story, and I'm like, that's crazy. I know some people that have a story that's unique, and you should hear it from them. And it's just been this recurring theme. And it's been now your person number 39, or actually 38, because one of them was a 2-parter. But that's what it's been. And I had no idea that people that I follow, people that follow me on social media, but other people. So obviously there's been some sharing by osmosis out there, but how'd you discover? Because for me, I think it was just Twitter. I'm not sure if I followed you or you followed me, but I'm just clicking through your, whatever was in your profile, and I think it linked to your podcast. And I'm like, oh, this guy's got a podcast. And I personally listen to a ton of podcasts. So I just added it to my list. And whenever you had a new one, I just went through it. And I went through the subjects, and I listened to one. And at the beginning of it, you said, you should go back and listen to the beginning because you'll understand the background. So I literally stopped where I was in that one.
It works.
Podcast number 7 or something. And I went back to the first one and just listened all the way through. And it was, I think you had maybe 15 or so that first go around. I'm like, oh, so I got caught up in yard work and everything that you were doing. But how did you, that's a long way of me asking, how did you even figure out that people were listening?
That's a 2-part answer. The first part answer is I was able to keep the same feed in iTunes. So the Jakob Eliason podcast from 2018, when I got started, I was able to just erase everything and put the new episodes in. So with that being said, people who were subscribed in the past, I was able to hold on to some of those.
Okay.
And so I think for me, it's that I've been able to see myself hold on to those, some subscribers from the first go around that even after 2 years, they're still listening. And that means something. And then the other side of that is feedback. Like, I've had people reach out to me from people that I talk to every single day, every single time I get on Twitter, to people that I've either never met or haven't talked to since 2000, 9, right, have hit me up and said, hey man, I just wanted to let you know that I came across this. I had no idea about it, and good stuff. Just like little things like that here and there. But going back to the first time, you teed that up for a really good marketing question, because the first time around, I figured out people were listening because I marketed it.
Okay.
Like I actually put intent behind it. It was a project for me as much as it was, hey, I want to start a podcast about something. I don't know what it is. It was hey, if I'm going to start it, let me figure out how to grow it. And so I ran ads, like I advertised for it.
Really?
I figured out how to get it in front of new people and tried to see how Facebook would work. And I did a giveaway and all this kind of stuff to figure out, just to see what does it look like to acquire new listeners? How much does it cost to get these in? And I wanted to see how that landscape worked from an advertising standpoint and a marketing standpoint. I followed a ton of people just so that they would click on it and see it. I didn't care about the ratio. I just followed a ton of people so they'd click and look. And so I generated a lot of interest that way. So that kind of proved, hey, there's a way to do this that's alternative to the status quo, that's obviously working, that I need to put in my back pocket for later.
I should have known better than ask a marketing guy how he launched a podcast.
Yeah, I marketed it. I just marketed it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And but the craziest thing was, one of the things I wanted to see was, what does it look like? Because when you do a Facebook ad, you can see how people interact across the different states. And so what I would do is I would say, okay, which state had the most interaction with this ad? And then I would pay more to market in that state. And it was typically southern states, but I was figuring out marketing and advertising back then. And it was cool because I ended up, basically what I did is I did a giveaway and I sent some NBA stickers out. I was like, hey, if you subscribe and leave me a review, then I'll send you some NBA stickers. And I had like 17 people in 17 different states do that. And I still connect with them to this day for the most part. Like they'll still respond to my stuff. They, for the most part, believe they still listen based on the data and stuff. So it was pretty cool. It's been pretty cool to see how many are still around for 2.0, as I call it. And some have reached out and some haven't, but it's cool. It's been a pretty cool experience. I so wish that I was putting out more episodes, but I'm just busy.
Oh, trust me, same way. Like I'm on, like I said, this is probably like the second or third podcast that I've been doing, but this particular one, this is the longest one I've been doing, but I've had some pauses with this one too, because life gets in the way. I can't help it, but I do know, I literally sat down, I said, what can I do to do this the right way? Now I've done just about everything except for give something away and run ads, but that's intriguing because like you've invested in yourself in this personal project.
Yeah, quite literally. I put my name on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
I struggled with that deal for a little bit. And I think because especially coming out of college, you're looking at starting a business. It's so easy to start e-com now. It's so easy to start a blog. Like it's so stupid easy to not put your name on something and try to generate something around it. But it burned me out. I tried that a couple times.
Yeah.
I made multiple blogs and tried these little podcasts and these little different business models. And it's just, I just stuck my name on it. I stuck my name on it and put my money where my mouth was, even just to figure it out. I knew it wasn't going to be a huge deal. I wasn't expecting that. I just was willing to say, hey, I'll spend $125 over the next 3 months to figure out how this works.
Did you ever have the intention of, okay, I'm going to do this podcast. I see there are people out there making money. What can I do? Or was it literally just a personal project, personal branding? I want to do this because I want to share this message with people.
I think everybody goes through that conversation with themselves on whether or not and how they can make money from it. And even myself here lately, I've been thinking about putting one of my favorite short slogans on a t-shirt and just dropping it on my website for anybody who would want to use that as a way to support. I think naturally when you start creating something that means something, you want to start being able to find support for it. But I think at the same time, there's a delicate balance. And for me, it's not about the money. For me, it's about these conversations, being able to have you on my podcast and talk about marketing and how that integrates with the school system and stuff like that. Is that opened us up for this conversation here. And quite frankly, from a business standpoint, to be able to have certain people on opens up opportunities to do business and to network and stuff like that. So it's not really about the money for me, but I definitely am constantly looking out ahead and thinking down the road, like what's the best way? Because quite frankly, I've got to be doing the things today to get me to that point.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have something in mind, like I would much rather have a t-shirt that someone buys that I make $6 profit off of than just asking people to pay me or trying to run ads. And so it's a complicated process, but I try to be patient with that kind of stuff, because when you try to do stuff like that too early, you can compromise integrity. And I'm all about my reputation when it comes to this stuff.
It can drive you down the wrong path, I think.
Right.
And I've literally had some people, hey, I want to start a podcast. Can you give me some advice? I'm like, okay, because everyone, I don't know what the stat is, but everyone has a podcast. It is what it is. And COVID, everyone jumped on Zoom, they started talking, and they recorded, and then they figured out how to post it, and they started a podcast. But I know some people that literally have legitimately done phenomenal stuff of recording conversations and gotten tons and tons of views. People that I've helped, I'm like, wait a minute, you're getting like 2,000 views. I get 200 on a good day, but I'm also not constantly tweeting mine out. I'm not getting superstar people. I'm literally like telling the everyday story, and I wanted to do something different in a unique way. And it's basically just a hobby for me. I enjoy having these conversations, sharing them, and editing them, and getting it out there for the world to listen. So I get it. I get where you're coming from when you say all that.
Yeah, what you just said about money and what I was mentioning earlier, like when you go back to the fundamentals of stuff, anything that money is the fuel behind or the reason for typically is not it typically doesn't end in the perfect way.
You don't want to be the wrong motivating factor. Yeah.
When you look at the world, when you look at the way that states and the government and places are run, when money's a driving factor behind a lot of really bad things that are disguised as even good things. And so I've always tried to look at the fundamentals of stuff. And that's one of those, is that if it's about the money primarily and not about the passion or the heart or whatever, the calling per se, then it can get entangled, I guess.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
How many podcasts do you listen to?
Ooh, on a consistent basis.
You read too much, probably.
I do. But I do listen to podcasts. So I like conversational stuff. I like Joe Rogan's podcast, depending on who they are.
Okay.
I'm not going to go listen to Joe Rogan just because, but if it's somebody like, for example, I listen to, his podcast with Andrew Yang. I certainly listen to his one with Kanye, Matthew McConaughey. If it's somebody of interest to me, sure, I want to listen because they have good conversation. Tim Ferriss is another one. He's an entrepreneur. Same way. He brings on the same type of people, but has a conversation with them from the entrepreneurship business side, as opposed to like the hippie MMA side. But I like those two because they're long form. They'll go long, and the only really time I can listen to podcasts is when I'm running. So I like that long form style audio. And then there's another podcast that I really like, and he influenced mine a lot. It's called the Ross Bolin podcast. And I'm not people that are on this probably aren't familiar with it, but he's like a 29-year-old guy. And he used to be, what's interesting about him is he used to be part of you've probably heard of this, Total Frat Move. Okay. So he was one of the founders of that, but then he had this like personal transformation in the middle of all that. The company blew up, and he's gone down this totally different path, and he has his own platform. He talks a lot about mental health, and he's really funny. And so I listen to him because he talks about current events, and he talks about important things for like millennial people, but he's also just like super goofy and outrageous and talks about stuff that I would never probably bring up on my show. But that's kind of my rotation, is the Joe Rogan, because I didn't used to listen to him. So I've got thousands of episodes that I can go back and just find influential people over time to listen to him talk to. But typically, if I'm doing audio long form, I'm doing audiobooks.
Oh, okay. So that ties in with your reading, with you being buried in books.
Right. Yeah. Because it's typically when I run that I get to listen to stuff, because I listen to music and try to keep just like a low elevator music on in the background while I'm working to keep me focused. But when I do listen to stuff, I do go long form, and audiobooks is typically what I do. Right now I'm listening to Obama's new book, A Promised Land. Okay. And Colin Jost from Saturday Night Live, a very punchable face. So I'm going back and forth between those two.
Nice. That's an interesting combo. How in the world do you run with podcasts? Because here's my thing. We talked about this in your podcast too, that's one thing we have in common as well. Not just the marketing stuff, but also running. But I've tried. I have a whole, I don't even know, I should count at some point. I listen to several podcasts, and I often I have some of them are like daily radio shows out of different markets that I've found and stumbled on that I like listening to. Some are just weekly things and feature things or whatever. So I always have an episode. Like right now, I've got one episode that I'm in progress with, and I'll have in the morning a new episode of another show and four segments of a show that's a radio show in DC. So I have throughout the week several podcasts. But I cannot, for the life of me, go out and run 3 or 5 miles with someone talking about, it could be sports, it could be marketing, it could be some Hall of Fame basketball player, it could be college basketball, which I'm super interested in. I have to have music. I just have to have music to run. I can't explain it.
I don't not listen to music. I listen to music on short runs.
Okay. But you can listen to music while you run. Like I can't even listen to a podcast on a short run. It's something about like pace and motivation, and I just can't do it. How in the world do you do it?
There's a couple different answers to this question. One of the answers is that, or I guess one of the justifications and the reasons that I can do it is I can't listen to podcasts or audiobooks any other time unless I am not doing anything. And I guess when I'm running, I'm doing something. But
you get that release.
Or if I'm going around the grocery store, or if I'm trying to do work and someone else is talking, my like ADD and ADHD is just, oh no, like I can't handle it. And so I can't listen to podcasts or radio while I work, because if I'm trying to, a lot of my work is research and reading and identifying and paying attention to stuff and analyzing. And so I can't do that while I'm listening to somebody, especially on talk radio.
That's so funny. That's what I do. I literally listen to talk radio and podcasts while I'm working. Now, granted, a lot of my work sometimes could be in InDesign or Photoshop, but a lot of times I'm in the spreadsheet, like and at the school district stuff. I'm typing up scripts or doing whatever, and I can listen to talk radio while I'm doing that. So that's like the one thing that we're just completely flipped on.
Yeah, I can't, because I get to paying attention to them, and then 9 times out of 10, they're just there for the hoot and hollering and the arguing and stuff. And so then I just get, my IQ starts to drop while I'm working, and I'm like, I can't do this. And so I'll just opt for some smooth jazz in the background to keep me just like in a focused pace.
Yeah.
But like when I'm running or when I'm driving, I can listen to an audiobook because I'm not speaking. I'm not talking. Nobody else is talking. I'm not responsible. So I have to be in a certain zone to be able to listen to a podcast effectively. The shower is another good place, even though it's only between 3 and 12 minutes, depending on the day.
That is funny.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I can't. If I listen to music, I'm not running more than, it depends. If I run 4 to 5 miles listening to music, I'm going to be feeling it afterwards, because I can't slow down listening to music.
And that's why I like about it. It keeps me going.
Yeah. But see, I'm not in, and I think we talked about this a little bit when we run. I enjoy so much just like the process of the whole thing and just like being in the run than I do the time and stuff. Yeah. So I want to slow and lock into a comfortable, so.
That makes sense. Have you been running for a while, by the way? Or is that's something you just got into during quarantine and lockdown?
No, I started for the really heavily, yes, but I started running last year in January. I ran like a mile, like halfway through January, or a half mile, and was like, oh, this is terrible. But then I just kept running a half mile until I could run a mile. And then that kind of culminated into a running habit during the summer. But then when it got colder, I was like, I don't think so. Then I picked it back up again the next spring. And I'm still running. I haven't run. I think I've ran 8 miles in the last week, but that's 8 more miles than I've ran any winter ever. So
they got to start somewhere, because
it's just getting cold, and I'm not used to that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to adapt to running in cold when I've never, done anything like that.
I can tell you,
I stay inside.
I don't know how or why it happened to me. I know why I started running. It was because I would play basketball, although albeit terribly, but I enjoyed getting out there acting like I could play. And that was some sort of workout. The group of guys I played with, for one reason or another, the group's disbanded, just couldn't play anymore. And I'm like, I sit at a desk all day for work, and I try to be active when I can and get up and talk to people, or I take pictures for work and things like that, and get on my feet. But I didn't have consistent workout. And it became, all right, let's try to go out and go to the park and see if we can run. I don't like it. It literally just happened. Like,
That's pretty much how it starts.
And I started just walking. I started like walking a half a mile or a quarter mile, and then running a quarter, like vice versa, just alternating it.
Yeah.
Until it became, I think I can run a mile like without stopping. And that first time I tried, it was like, oh, it was painful. And I wasn't even going fast. I'm talking like a 13-minute pace of a jog, and I'm like, oh, this was awful. And I Googled and I looked up, all right, what do I need to do? And you see all the 5K, couch to 5K plans. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I just immediately said, you know what? Let's see if I can walk half a mile, run a half a mile, and build up. And I just started doing these interval runs. And it became one day in, I guess it was 2018, maybe late 2017, I can't remember, when I said, I think I can run 3 miles straight, because I just worked up to, I got to 2 miles one day. I'm like, wow, I just ran 2 miles nonstop. That's crazy. And that was like a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
And I did the first day I did the 3 mile, and I did it. It was like 45 minutes for me to run 3 miles. And I was still doing some walking in there, but it was like, all right, I did it. And then I got to the point where I was doing it and trimming down the time. And I remember the day I got to under 40 minutes. I was like, this is a big deal for me. And I'm like, I think I can do this. And it just progressed and progressed. And then I said, you know what? I think I'm going to sign up for a race. I don't know why I did, but I eventually got myself to the point where I was running 3 miles, 5K, 3.1 at about 35, in between 35 and 30 minutes. And the day that I ran my first 5K, my goal was to run it in under 30 minutes. I think I did it in 29:15 or something like that.
Right there.
So it's like right there. Yeah. And then fast forward, I'm looking here at my wall, and I've got like a ton of these finisher medals, because when I go out and run. But just this past weekend, for some reason, I don't know why, it was 55 degrees. I'm like, I need to get some miles in, because I do these virtual challenges. For some odd reason, this past Saturday, I ran 13.1 miles in over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I don't know if I'm ever going to do that again, but that's what it's come to now.
You skipped that couch to 5K and went straight to couch to half marathon.
And I didn't train for it. I just literally said, I think I can. What happened was I got this virtual challenge in my app, and I needed to get so many kilometers in a month. And I said, okay, I'm going to run a 10K today. And as I was running, I'm just going, well, if I go around one more time after the 10K, that would help really get me closer to that. And then I can split up the rest of my miles on Sunday and Monday. And I'm like, hey, am I really going to run on Sunday though? Got things going on. And I just was out there. I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to go, seriously,
we're doing it today.
if I'm going to go around one more time, that's going to put me pretty close to 12 miles. And then I think there's a milestone. Like, what? So I literally was like looking at my phone as I'm running, which is awkward, which I hate doing, because I hate having things in my hands when I run. I looked up and it said 13.1 miles would be a half marathon. I'm like, I guess I'm going to go ahead and do 13.1.
Might as well.
That's what it was. I'm like, wow. And I wasn't hurt after it either, but that's what it's come to now. Go figure.
Yeah, I've got mine this weekend, because this upcoming weekend is when St. Jude would normally have their marathon downtown. So I'm going to have to figure out I was supposed to run 11 last weekend, and I bailed on it. I just didn't feel great, and some other stuff had happened, and it was just not a good day for me to run 11 miles. And this upcoming weekend is the half marathon that I'm supposed to be running virtually. So we'll see. We'll see if I can finish it, but
you'll finish. Honestly, you'll finish. You might walk a little, you might jog a little. You'll finish. Yeah, you'll finish.
When I go in the 9-10 mile range, I'm usually doing run a mile, walk a minute, run my second mile, walk another minute. Like, I'm really trying to pace myself. We'll see. I'm looking forward to it though. It'll be cold. I'm not used to running in the cold, but
I love it. Cooler weather is my thing.
I just got a lot of gear, so I got stuff to cover my head. I've got
that's the best.
The cold body gear, because again, I'm not used to dressing to go out in the cold. I don't hunt, so I don't have all this thermal layer stuff because I don't play high school baseball anymore. And so I finally ordered some stuff, and I walked outside, and I'm like, damn, I want to wear this to take the dog out. Like, I feel great.
Yeah.
And so I'm ready. I got face coverings and stuff, so I'm ready for it.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
And I'm going to I'll get to knock out like 2.5 more hours of Obama's book, because it's like 26 hours. I've got like 25 hours left.
Oh my gosh.
Or something crazy. But it's so good. It's so good. He tells such great stories. It's so good.
I may have to get that a shot.
I'm excited.
I may have to give that a shot.
He's just going to imagine. Could you imagine that voice just talking you through your 13.1? Like, how could you not?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Talk about motivation, right?
Yeah. His just deep voice. Yeah. So anyway, that's why I listen to that stuff.
Yeah. We've gone an hour. I didn't even feel like it. Like I said, first time we talked, it was just like, man, we were just going. And I really appreciate your popping on, man. I want you to do me a favor. Tell the folks, I know you've taken a little bit of a move social media to the back burner, but I want to let people know how they can connect with you and find your podcast and all that fun stuff. So if you don't mind sharing all those fun details, go ahead and shoot that stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. I have taken a backseat to social media right now. I'm still on, like, I check DMs and things like that, but I'm trying not to post. If you post a podcast episode or something with me, I'm going to go on there and retweet it, but I'm trying to really avoid staying on there all day. But if you do want to connect with me, the best place is probably my website. It's jakobeliason.com, JAKOBELIASON.com. And then my podcast is the Jakob Eliason Podcast. And there's ways you can subscribe to the mailing list on my website if you want to, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. But that's going to be the best two ways. And then I'm at Jakob Eliason on social media everywhere. I'm just not on there right now. So just shoot me a DM.
And I'm looking through all of the podcasts I listen to, and I think just from looking, your cover art is probably the one seed of cover art.
Yeah, I paid someone in the Philippines like $7 or $12 to make that. I just paid somebody online. I was like, hey, I need a cartoon. And I said, here's 3 pictures. I sent a really professional one, a semi-professional one, and then this goofy one of me sitting in a chair with my hat backwards. And they were like, I like this one. And so I said, okay, I trust you. You're the professional.
It's unique. It's unique. Like I'm looking at all mine. They've got text. Even mine is just text, and it's a graphic that I created, but it's unique. It's different. I love the cartoon look. Go out and look for it. The Jakob Eliason Podcast. You got another one coming soon at all? Another episode?
I've got 2. Awesome. I've got 2. Just before we hopped on here, I recorded 2 episodes. I've got one with an entrepreneur and a student at Columbia. He's an author, entrepreneur, student. And then I just recorded another one recently with a couple guys who just wrote a book. And it's a coffee table book with a bunch of pictures of basketball goals.
Nice. And
that I'll leave you with that. You can go check it out, and it's going to come out next week. But yeah, I've got a couple coming, and then another one, probably another solo episode coming soon, because I got some stuff to say.
Nice. I like it. I always enjoy those solo episodes. I like them all, but your solo episodes are my favorite because you typically do deep dives into stuff that's on your mind. So I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, and I got a lot of stuff coming. We just had an election. This is a big time coming for our generation, and I've been taking and doing my due diligence to be informed and be educated in a lot of different manners over the last 6 months. And so there's a lot of stuff that I've been compiling that I'm ready to bring forward to the surface. So I'm excited.
I like it. Thanks again, man, for hopping on. This has been fun. We'll have to do it.
Yes, sir.
Do it. I say do it again, but I think we really will have to do it again. You wouldn't be the first person that's made a return guest on my podcast. Don't be shocked if I appear in your inbox again asking for another appearance.
Just say the word.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Persons of Interest. Please be sure to subscribe and to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Persons of Interest is available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. For additional feedback, comments, or guest suggestions, reach out to Derek on Twitter at @ddocket. This has been Persons of Interest.